Hello, everybody. Grant Hunter here with another Product Growth Leaders topic of the week. The topic this week is about burnout in product managers. May, you and I were having a conversation in December about a Reddit thread you had started, and that sort of got the juices flowing. Talk to me a little bit about where, I know you've been doing some writing on this. Talk to me a little about this topic and how sort of the importance of it right now.
Well, it's weird because I started it with the intention of talking to people. And then what it turned into was 70% of the people I talked to, just generally product managers, mostly on the internet, just said they were burning out. And I don't understand that because 70% is a big number, So the idea that so many people in our field are burning out and just don't know what to do next is kind of alarming. And I feel like we should talk about it because the idea, we spend so much time at work, and the idea of burning out and having that time at work bleed into all other aspects of our lives and making us feel terrible about it is not healthy. So in a way, it's more a way to think about what does healthy product management look like. So I think it's important to talk about it.
Boy, that's really putting a nice flip on it. What does healthy product management look like? And maybe that's something that we do as another topic of the week. If we could build this in what would look like. Steve, this resonates with you as well. We even have a quote from a different Reddit that's basically the same thing, right?
Right. I'll probably screw up the quote, but the guy said, I'm getting no leadership. I'm getting no guidance from my boss. I'm terrified I'm going to be fired because I don't know what I'm doing. And it's just so shocking to me that there are people in a role who say they don't know what they're doing and they're getting no help. I mean, what is their leadership doing?
That's a good question. What is their leadership doing? And we're going to talk a little bit about, what can they be doing? But on Monday, we started the poll. We started topic of the week as we normally do on Monday. And Jason Vinceletter, just so you know, Eva Beasley has officially taken your spot as the first answer every week. She's the one who I can now count on. I mean, I know she's a good, we grew up like a mile from each other. So we've got that Philly bond, but, it took a while to replace you, Jason. But Eva came in. We asked the question, what are the key factors that lead product managers to become burnt out and overwhelmed? And Eva, you came in first. You talked about many factors.
Yeah, I think, sorry, I'm a little late, but yeah, I think it's not a black and white issue. There's definitely gray. I think being assigned so many features is one, your leadership not knowing how much work these features take, and then them making false promises to their management, and it goes all the way up the chain. I feel like, me personally, I am trying to do all this work outside of work to better myself with school and courses and books, and leadership doesn't, I don't want to say they don't care, but they don't care and they don't want to pay for it. And there's no employee development to make me a better product manager. And, it's just at the end of the day, we all just talk about work 24/7. There's no personal dynamic. Whenever I get on a call with someone, I always try to say, well, how was your weekend, or how was this? But it's they don't even want to talk about that. They just want to go right to what they want or what they need or what they care about. And it's definitely being on an island. I'm estranged from my family. I can't talk to my family about this. My friends don't really know anything about product management. So it's really difficult to be able to tell other people how you're dealing with work.
No, I get, many of you have heard my sort of talking about one of the ways that this community got started was during COVID. Steve and I had started this, and it's I love my wife, but she doesn't want to talk about product management or ANSOS growth strategy matrix or stuff like that. And this, we created this to be a place for us to talk to each other, but it's tough. We are, and there's a lot of pressure coming on. And Steve, I'll get to you in a second. We've got a partner we work with, Outsell Research and Advisory for the content and publishing space. And their CEO just wrote a whole blog on flexibility in the workplace and how we really need to be more flexible. And it seems like that would play into it as well. So Eva, thank you so much. Steve, your thoughts?
Yeah, I just, in response to Eva's point, it's always so fascinating when we do one of our classes, how often people say, this is the first time this group of people has ever got together to talk about how we do product management here. I mean, everybody's working by themselves, and the only time we ever, work together in product management is when we're supporting somebody else. We're doing a sales kickoff, and all the product managers are there because they're the only ones who seem to know anything. And so in our classes, it's like, I think every class people have said, this is so great for us to talk about product management among product managers.
And even get to know each other. Some of them like haven't had a chance to talk. They've known who each other, they've seen each other, but they've never like conversed and did those types of things. So it's amazing. And it's sort of, sad for our profession, our practice, that this is where we are and this is happening. Jason Weber, and Jason, it's good to have you on the call. You've been having some great answers to the Monday questions, and I'm always hoping you're going to show up because I want to talk through some of your great answers. You said Eva hit a couple of points well, but some of this is not just unique to product management; it's almost unique to everyone. But talk to me about sort of the three that you went into.
Well, the not having a peer group is huge. It really is. The biggest one that I wanted to talk about was not being allowed to do what product management is. So many product managers I saw when I was in software at a large company I was at, they were on the hardware side. They were expediters. They were go fix whatever immediate customer problem there is and dig into it. And they weren't allowed the time to do the product management job. And that alone, if you have expectations of what your job is and you can't do that leads to frustration. I mean, that's just huge. The other thing that the other one I brought up, which happened to me more than once in my career, is all of a sudden senior management just tells you this is what it is. And you're not allowed to do any of those things, no matter how wrong what senior management is telling you is, because they just talked to they had a conversation with another senior manager at a customer who are, they're further removed from the product and the customer's further removed, and they've, what they've said. And it just becomes very, very frustrating that you've been brought in, expected and paid to do a job, and you can't. So
that last thing, Jason, really resonates with me. I've been in that place a couple of times. I was in a job where I was the product leader. I was brought in to fix stuff. I went out and did my discovery. I even did a survey and validated it. And 80% of our customers wanted to access our content on the web, right? And it was showing in the usage that over 80% of the people were using the web to get to our website and to our stuff. And the CEO said, I'm friends with insert Silicon Valley royalty CEO founder. And he says that apps are all that matter and mobile is all that matters and the web doesn't matter. So we're going to spend our money to invest in the app, not on the web, not our web platform. And I'm like, but the research shows, right? The data shows. And that was sort of at that point when I knew I was leaving that company, right? Because it's so demoralizing when you do the right practice of product management. I did the discovery interviews. I interviewed people. I identified the core problems to solve and the value props. And I did a survey to validate it. And I'm now getting a little frustrated just thinking about it. So
you look like you're getting wound up a little bit, Grant.
I am getting a little wound up. I
apologize for bringing up past trauma.
It is. It's sort of like stuck in my head. Paul Hatala came on next, and he said topping his list was senior management's ignorance that product management is a craft. And I thought that was a great way to look at it. We've talked about this on past calls. There's a lot of misunderstanding or not any understanding of what this craft or practice of product management is and what it should be in the business role of product management. So I thought that was good. And all right, Faith, we're ready. I can have Steve do his rant button if you want Steve to put the rant button on, but Faith sort of unloaded in her
I won't go into I won't go into the whole rant. I will just kind of +1 the other factors that people have highlighted. But I did want to add something that is, I mean, it's frustrating for me, or kind of contributing to a sense of burnout for me. So it's one thing to continually learn and learn new skills, and and that's great. We all have to keep doing it. We have to keep doing it through our whole career. That's wonderful. What I feel like I experience in the product management world is people kind of recycling old ideas with new names, not necessarily creating a whole lot of new value, but just creating a whole lot of new jargon or templates that we, somehow need to keep up on in order to be seen as current. And, I put some examples in the rant. I won't repeat those, but one that I noticed this morning was, I'm reading, I'm in a book club and that's reading Start at the End. And one of the techniques, talked about there was, to look at inhibiting and promoting forces. And he, author used an example of, make a diagram with an up arrow and a down arrow, and then arrange the promoting forces with the up arrow and the inhibiting forces with the down arrow. And I was like, we had a perfectly good technique called a T-chart for force field analysis at one point back in the day. And it seems really a lot like the same thing. So I guess if I were to put my finger really on the frustration, is that it seems like, if I try to frame this as constructively as I can, it seems like there's an obligation in professional development to just keep learning new names for the same thing. And it seems like maybe not a lot of support for deepening skills or growing mastery or learning more advanced skills, because it feels sometimes like we're just kind of recycling the same stuff again. And I just wonder what that does to us as a profession. But for me personally, it's frustrating. And I think maybe that is just a late career, kind of frustration, because somebody who's at 3 to 5 years experience won't feel that. Right. So I saw Jason nodding.
They're on the one iteration of it, right? They're on the first iteration they've learned of it, not the third or fourth iteration of the same type of concept.
Exactly. And I think it dovetails with the idea of being respected for your expertise and people knowing what you can bring to the table, and kind of not understanding. I don't know. I'll just leave it there so I don't fall off the rant cliff.
No, I totally appreciate it. And anybody who wants to see the full rant can go to the community and see Faith's answer, where she even tagged the rant, so you knew which portion of it was rant versus regular answer. I really appreciate that. But one thing it does get to me, Steve, we should probably go through like the last year's worth of topic of the weeks. Every week we get 1, 2, 3 books that somebody references as a great book for that topic. And we should probably, I say we, and I'll probably have my kids do it, go through and, find the references we've had and document them, because I think that would be an interesting, tool. Everybody's looking for books. And, one thing I love about this group of people, and I'm now on my little tangent, is that everybody, almost everybody here brings new books that I haven't heard and give me good ideas of things to read. I read Annie Duke's Thinking in Bets, I think because of Cory. And, it's that continually learning I get from here. So I appreciate everybody for that. Joy McCaffrey, you came in with a typical Joy McCaffrey, less than a sentence, talk to me about your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, before we get to that, I just want to address Steve's comment about being terrified of being fired. And I just want to say that can be different from burnout. And I can speak to that because I've experienced both, being burned out and being terrified of being fired. But in terms of my answer, constantly shifting priorities, as a product manager, we are excited about our product, where we care about our product. We want to make things better. We care about our customers, and we get excited, like this is going to work. This is going to help people. and you get really excited about it, and then they shift priorities, and then you get excited about that. You're like, okay, well, this is the new priority, but I can do this. I can, I can help, I can make it better. And then after a while, a couple of shifting priorities, you just don't care anymore. It's just like, I just can't even get emotional. I can't invest anymore. I'm just going to do my job.
On a previous call, and there's now 100 previous calls, so I don't even know which one it was. We had this conversation of, should you fall in love with your product, right? Know your product well and that type of stuff. Or maybe it's not the product we're falling in love with, it's the problem. We're falling in love with. I had a conversation this week with somebody who is a research analyst covering my old company. And I'm talking about ideas I had for problems to solve 20 years ago. And she's like, yeah, those are great problems to solve. They still haven't solved them. And I'm still passionate about them 20 years later. And it can be frustrating. I think, Steve, you tell a story about how your daughter was dating somebody who didn't care about their product.
Yes. Yeah. She was dating a product marketing person who didn't know anything about the product. And she's like, you're done to me. You're dead to me now. And happily she married a design guy. So yeah, they're still. But that's part of the burnout. We find these problems, we find these personas, we understand the value prop and that type of stuff, and we get bought into it and we care about it. And then the tail wags the dog, or a shiny object comes up and we chase something else. New to the call, Jason Vinceletter. New to the call. Talk to me about your competing and shifting priorities. You sort of staying with joy on that.
Yeah, I'm started just staying with joy on that when I've experienced stress as a product manager. It was about shifting priorities, different things coming in, and no matter how you do the sort, if you will, Rice method, whatever you want, and there's always the trump, like you said, the trump card for the CEO coming in who talked to somebody on the golf course, and that could change a priority, or you just have some kind of traditional SWOT things that come in and change priorities, and that causes stress because as product managers, we're supposed to be looking at things that are 2, 3, 4 years out, looking at the vision, thinking about where we want to go, and shifting priorities can just move our cheese a bit. And we're still expected to deliver from other stakeholders, and that can also just distract what our vision and how to achieve our vision. And so that's always been a huge stress point for me. And then as a product management leader, there's a huge stress point on top of just managing other product managers as their priorities shift, and making sure that they're having their career growth, but they're getting pulled in other directions and having to go do demos and things of that nature. And so just realigning them and making sure that you're protecting them as well can just be another source of stress that I don't even think I listed on this on Monday. So
I mean, God, we're almost creating a whole index of these type of things. Time for another tangent, which is sort of related. I've been reading Brene Brown's Anatomy of the Heart, and it seems like we could be an anatomy of stressors and burnout for product management, and there's different times and ways to look at it. I don't know, one of those things that go on the list that I'll never do again. Thank you, Jason. Cory, Bryan, channeling your inner joy, Joy McCaffrey, that is, not inner joy, with a 2-word answer.
Yeah, that's, to me, it comes down to meaningless work. If you're doing meaningless work for you, it's going to suck. I don't care what it is. If you're doing meaningful work that's hard, I get energized by that. I love to go and solve customer problems. And I had a very interesting dichotomy of those things this week. I had one group I was working with that we were focusing on customer problems and figuring out how to restart this application and do the right things and focus on the smallest core of the product. And another company that had 34 coaches that were talking about how to use Jira. I don't give a shit about Jira. It is meaningless, useless work for something that's not going to be released for 2 years. 2 years. And that's what they were worried about. You want to talk about burnout? Imagine pedaling a bike going nowhere for 2 years. Is that fun? Is that meaningful? Or do you just say, I don't care anymore? And so that's what I did today. I quit this job and I'm working on this one because that's meaningful work.
I think I've talked about it before. There's a book by Poe Bronson called "What Should I Do with My Life?" And he interviewed a whole bunch of people who had made midlife career changes. And what he found, those people who had found their place, their zen or whatever, the 3 words they used to describe it was meaningful, significant, and fulfilling. So meaningful is a key one. I think I could argue that it's hard to have it feel significant and fulfilling if it wasn't meaningful.
And I'll leverage something that Steve's talked about a couple times, which is, doing sales demos. Maybe you like doing sales demos. Maybe doing those demos energizes you and gives you something valuable to work on and things like that. And maybe working with the team doesn't. Maybe working with the team is meaningless or something like that. And it's different for everybody. So that meaningful work, what you find meaningful in your work, I find a way to make this interesting? That's a fun game to play sometimes, which is, how can I make this interesting for me? If you can find that way, then you can make that meaningful. But otherwise, there is no amount of rewards, incentives, structure, threats that's going to make that meaningful work pleasant, or that unmeaningful work pleasant to you.
And when you find meaningful work, it's amazing what you'll put up with, right? Maybe it's like the counterweights, right? The justice type stuff that you can put up with a lot more when that's there. Awesome. DJ Dailey, you came in, plus oneing everybody, or yes anding everybody, but you really want to talked about something that I hadn't thought about when talking about this, but knowing your background and knowing a lot of the people who have been laid off in the past few months, probably we're feeling this idea of this, hyper growth and the pressure that comes with that.
Yeah. So for context, for folks on the call, I was recently exited from Fanatics, which is a hyper growth e-commerce startup in the sports apparel space. And my experience was both the hyper growth comment that I alluded or elaborated on, and a combination, sort of a trifecta of that, unrealistic expectations that came with the role, and a boss who was sort of wrought with management anti-patterns. So it was sort of, sort of like I said, a trifecta. But yeah, I mean, my experience, my specific area of the company was basically building integrations between Fanatics and retailers. And so we have very aggressive growth numbers as the company sprints towards an IPO. And with that comes basically a build it mentality, build it and ship it mentality, with very little appetite for pausing to slow down, to speed up those types of efforts, to build the infrastructure to enable sustainable growth. And I think product often, as I said in my comment, is the glue that keeps everything together. And that can only last so long, especially once scale, you've proven the model and now scale is being demanded, but you don't have the tools available to scale. So all that weight falls on your shoulder and that of your team. Yeah.
Yeah, and Faith, you had called out the one quote, failure for many orgs, execs or investors is not an option, right? Or that was actually from the Graham one. From DJs, it was leadership demands greater scale, but it's not interested in retooling or paying down debt, which would create sustainable growth. And isn't that what we're trying to get to, is sustainable product growth? And too often we're not.
Well, that's exactly the thing though, right, Grant? Who is interested in doing that? Like sometimes within our community, we take that as a given that is what we should be trying to do. But often we're in organizations who don't value that. Yeah. And, there is then some, friction when, what I value as a professional or what I believe, is my either obligation or my responsibility or what I'm trained to do, when that's not aligned with what the company's priorities are. That's a problem. Yeah. We could say that it's objectively true that we should be aiming for sustainable growth and creating healthy technology and so forth. And that's all great, but the organization that we're in may not share that value. And maybe one thing that might be more constructive for us as product managers or as a community might be to start to acknowledge just some of these different flavors and sort of go, okay, you know what? Maybe watch these things without judgment and sort of, it's not bad or good that this company has those values, those are values that are different from mine. And then
Yeah.
that is prompts some kind of decision that I need to make.
Yeah, I completely and totally get that. It's, you know, and I think about the short-term focus, even at big companies like where I've worked before, you've had the quarterly mindset, right? And so all of a sudden we're not looking at sustainable growth. We're not looking at the future. We're only looking at the short term. You get that at the growth companies in the VC funded startups who are just trying to get to an exit, right? And they're only caring about that exit. And even the PE companies. I've seen plenty of PE portfolio companies who they are doing everything they can, cut costs to drive up EBITDA in the last 2 years just so they can get a bigger valuation. But then that leaves this bomb, this debt, technical debt that's waiting out there to happen. Great answers from everybody. Richard and Calvin, I want to get you guys in on this as well. You guys hadn't put stuff in there. Let's start with Richard. Your take, I'll put the question back up. What are the key factors that lead product managers to become burnt out and overwhelmed?
So my real question is, are we talking burnt out in the role of product management or burnt out at the location we're working? And I think really what we're talking about is burnout at that location.
Yeah.
Because that location has a lot of toxic behaviors that you're dealing with.
Yeah, that is a good, I mean, sometimes I've seen people get burnt out on product management, or more so, it may not have been the right fit for them. They didn't know what they were getting into. I've seen people come from other functions into product management thinking it was something different than it was. And they got burnt out on the role, but maybe it just was a bad match. But I think it's key. Maybe this is a bias in this community. We talked about cognitive bias a while ago, but I think for anybody to be in this product growth leaders community, to be on a call like this, we probably aren't burnt out on the role or the practice of product management. We're actually passionate about it and caring about it, but it's these companies, and we go through transitions. And you know, there's been some talk in the chat about, you know, the fear of getting fired. Joya talked about it. I've gotten let go a couple times, and as scary as it was, at one time I had just did a major investment in the house and that type of stuff. It always got better afterwards, you know, because of the burnout and stress that I had that was there. You know, there's some things, but every time that happened, it led to something better for me. And so, you know, having that experience, I feel better about it. I'm not as stressed about it. And I don't work for other people anymore. Well, I work for Steve. But you know, I think that's a key thing. For some people, it's going to be, okay, maybe the role's not for you. Let's get into a better role. For some people, it's like, okay, let's get you to a better place for you. That's going to be a better fit for what you want to do. Calvin, and I was saving Calvin for you know, to give us, you know, a nice, huge comments.
Yeah, I got nothing. I seriously, and there's so many good comments that as I kept reading and I'd read, I couldn't really add anything to really advance the conversation forward. So true to form, I did heart a lot of things. As I put in the chat, I will go back to something. I wrote this down. Something that Jason Weber said about not getting allowed to do the job, which I mean, we've probably all encountered, and I know that I haven't. And it gets, to me, it seemed like it gets back to senior management not understanding the role and the value that product managers bring, cause us to not do the job that we're being hired to do. So
no, I completely and totally get it. And I mean, again, we didn't hit every word. There were some other great posts, John Harmer and Graham Rowe, and some other people had some great comments. I encourage people to go check out in the community and see some of those things. Tracy Hollister, you had some a comment.
Yes, I've been enjoying the conversation, and I've nailed down, there's about 4 factors I think that are external and 2 that are internal. We haven't talked about the internal stuff yet. But I've been in a stress management support group for years, and it's a lot about how we think about things. But the external is the executives not supporting us, not understanding the role very well, and so not giving us the resources to do the job that we need to do. And so we hear about that a lot in talking to various clients. and lack of clarity about the role among our peers. And so we're always having to like defend ourselves. This is what it is, and this is what it isn't, and being pulled in all these different directions and having our limbs stretched. Then the high demands about the variety of the job of the role. And I always think about the Quartz open framework in terms of all the different aspects of the role, from discovery to working with the development team to the marketing aspects, and having to know so much. And then, as Faith was saying, all of the learning demands of the role. So it's the kind of job that it's hard to bound into like a 9 to 5. And then as far as the internal stuff, there's personality things. Like, for instance, if we are people pleasers, if we are the kind of people who don't say no easily, like we have to be comfortable with no in terms of all feature requests, but also in terms of being pulled into gaps that other departments, marketing or other departments, are asking us to do. And then it's also about expectations. I think when we have expectations of being able to be a real product manager, and then in this environment, it doesn't support those expectations, I think it's incumbent upon us to change our expectations or lower our expectations, and our performance will rise. And then we're not as frustrated. So a lot of that is how we choose to think about things.
I love that, Tracy. And Steve, I think I'm going to nominate Tracy to be on every call and write a summary blog, because she just did an amazing job synthesizing a lot of the stuff that was out there. May.
So I feel like the crux of everything that everyone said has been about your personal expectations and how it exists and how it compares to what's reality, right? And as Tracy said, like, yes, you can shift your expectations, but when 70% of the industry is burning out, I don't think it's a matter of expectations at this point. It is the fact that it's systemic. It's entirely systemic. It's like the companies have not caught up, or organizations and the structures that might be have not caught up to how we can do things better, right? So the question is, do these organizations want to do things better? And also for us as individuals working for companies, as individuals spending so much time working and thinking about it and obsessing about the work that we do, what do we want? And how do we get it? And if we have enough people saying the state of product management is not acceptable, then that is enough to push for a change sometimes. Because if you can't hire good PMs because your company does not work the way it needs to be effective, then there can be and needs to be conversations about that. And the more we talk about it, and the more awareness we have, and the more staunchly all of us, not just us on this call, but like us as a collective of people who care about the role, I think we could probably push change in the right direction. It won't be overnight.
So is this our Alice's restaurant moment, right? One person walks in and says, I'm burnt out, I want it to change, and they may think they're crazy, but two people do it, 3, it's a movement. We need to create a movement, right? We need to get everybody out there talking about it so we can be provocative and enforce that change. Is that what you're thinking, May?
As long as it's not a 40-minute song, I think we'll be fine.
The fact that you knew
I'm
that,
strongly doubtful that anyone knows what you're talking about.
You do, Steve.
I do, indeed.
So, wow. Any last thoughts before we go to the poll? And this is when, like, I hit the poll to come up, and then Paul Hurwitz says something, but he's not here. So actually, let me put it on the, so our poll question was, what is the most addressable cause of stress and burnout for product managers? So where can we look to fix? Where is the places we can address it to start getting, get those low hanging fruit early wins? The options were lack of role clarity, the isolation of the role, feeling on an island, continually shifting priorities, too much work or overcommitted, or other, it depends. One vote came in, 7% for other, it depends. And that was Graham saying all of the above, which that's not all of the above, it's other, it depends. Eva, you came in again first, my new favorite person who always answers my stuff first, Jason. Talk to me about the isolation.
Well, I think I've been with my company for 6 months. I am remote in North Carolina, and the majority of the PMs I work with are in Denver. And I, as of yesterday, am now the only female in my department because the other female that was in India quit. So I don't know. I feel like I'm all alone, and I feel like I don't have a personal rapport with my colleagues. It's all professional, and it's really difficult. I think I definitely feel like I'm on an island. I definitely don't feel like I'm being nurtured or given any development to grow. It's just, we're going to keep throwing this work at you, and you either do a good job or you suck. It's like Steve's point in the beginning of this call, there's no way to set me up for success other than to make mistakes. And I am embracing all of my mistakes.
Yeah, we've got to learn. It's continual learning and growth, and where we need to go from there. And the isolation is tough. I get it. But you also said, and I'm going to go to the next one. You also said if your close second would have been lack of role clarity. I voted there, 28% of the votes. We actually have 3 of them came in exactly the same at 28%. So we'll do that. I want to go to Jason, Weber, and Calvin to talk about role clarity. So Calvin, I'm going to go first to you now. I don't want to be accused of putting Calvin last. Nobody puts Calvin in the corner.
Well, I said lack of clarity because I think that was probably something that's the most easily and quickly addressable. And I think oftentimes products roles are unclear. And I think in most of the organizations that I've been in, there's some overlap with another department, and there's kind of a back and forth, and you kind of negotiating, or the position I'm in currently, which is more, the title's principal business product manager. It's a new position, so I'm kind of creating it myself.
Yeah.
And there's just lack of clarity that I felt like in the roles that I've had. It's just uncommon. It's just not clear cut.
Yeah.
Let me add one more sentence. Even one sentence, and then goes back to what I mentioned that alluding to what Jason had said. Walking into an organization where the role was product manager, but I was doing sales support. It sucked.
Yeah. No, I get it completely. Jason Weber.
Calvin stole a lot of my thunder there. But I agree that the whole poll was what's the most addressable area, not what's the most important. I think some of the other things are actually more important, but the most addressable one, which should be, this is the problem is product management means a lot of things to a lot of different people. There's still not a universal definition of what product management is. Some people think it's being a product owner. Some people think it's anything at all that isn't somebody else's role. And so having that clarity when you go into it, especially, I know a couple of people on this call are looking for the next role. Having some of those questions ready when you actually do the interview, even of what is this role? What are your expectations out of me? This is what I think a product manager is. Does that line up with what you think a product manager is? Having that conversation, it's not going to solve all the problems, because Lord knows all of us have walked into things where we thought it was one thing and we were told it was one thing and it turned out to be something completely else. But as far as easily addressable, that's it, I think.
And I voted for this as well. I tend to agree. And I look at it and said, if you can address the lack of role clarity, I think that could also help with the shifting priorities and the too much work and the overcommitted, because you're doing a better job. I'm not sure how much it helps with the isolation, but that's sort of where my head went through on that. So continually shifting priorities. Joy, you're the first icon that shows up on this one. And it's sort of this was your answer as well. Talk to me about defending this choice.
Well, so I had to vote for, what I had put as my answer. I think I already talked about it before, if you're not, it just gets to a point where you're just not passionate about what you're doing. You just don't care and it just becomes a job. I really don't have a whole lot more to add, although if I didn't vote for that, I would have voted for what I can't really read it, the one below it, the
Too much work overcommitted.
overcommitted. Yeah. Not enough product managers for the product.
Yeah, I completely get that. Who else on the call did the shifting priorities? Anybody else? Jason, Vinceletter.
I did.
No, you did too much work overcommitted.
Oh, I did that too.
You made 2 accounts.
Yeah.
Jason's voting twice.
I took a lot of
He's-
work
he's
to do that
skewing
too.
the results.
Vote early and vote often.
So Jason, talk to me about the debate between those two then.
I don't know. They look like they're pretty equal. I thought I did the shifting priorities, but
No.
apparently I did the overcommitted one.
Yeah.
I don't know. It looks like you don't have too much polarity in those, except for the
No,
second one. I can't read it.
it's sort of straight across.
Yeah, and
you
it
know,
was that's how I read it too. I was like, yeah. So it's usually I'm pretty. That was a tough one, honestly.
May, did you vote?
I voted late, but I voted for lack of role clarity because I feel like if your role was clear, even if you have too much on your plate, you can prioritize your work. So one of the things that happened was when I was working with a PM and the PM said, I am so burnt out because I am doing all of these things, and like about 30% of it was product management. So, and I said, okay, well, let's take a look at everything you're doing and let's put them in order of priorities. And he did that, and then he took it to his manager and said, well, here are my priorities, and the manager added more to his plate. So the question is, what is the role of, like, what is the problem here, right? The problem is not the PM. The PM did the thing they were supposed to do. The question, the problem is with leadership. His leadership doesn't know how to manage because they don't understand that we do need to prioritize. And just like how we prioritize for Eng because there is a set amount of capacity, the same is true for UX, for research, for product, for data, whoever else you need to do that work. There is a certain amount of capacity, and product managers aren't infinite magical gurus who can like make things happen. We are human. We cannot do 20 billion things.
Yeah, and even if we can accomplish things with heroic work, you can't do that 100% of the time. You need the balance. Roger Martin, I haven't gotten a Roger Martin or a Drucker quote in, so I wanted to go there. He talked about there is no execution. It's all strategy, because a strategy is about helping people make decisions with limited information. Even execution is strategy in that type of sense. And, it seems to me, to your point, if we're doing a good job with our strategy, right, we are empowering people to make better decisions and to focus their time and prioritize time. And for a leader to come back and then say, oh, here's more. Oh God, that's just killing me. I want this to be atomized. I want people to be able to make decisions and be empowered to make stuff happen. I think that's a place where we need to get to. DJ, did you vote?
I did not. But
I've
I've kind of come to a conclusion after some of the discussion here. I put a comment in in the chat about lack of role clarity, and specifically at Fanatics, it was an issue because it was basically product was treated like glorified project managers, and so that comes from the top. And so if we talk about what's addressable, it's really hard when it is it's part of the culture. It's an anti-pattern in the culture. Isolation, you can't do, you can't change, you can't address. If you're on an island, it's very hard to do that. Continually shifting priorities, oftentimes that comes from the top down, so very hard to address that. Too much work, basically you control your destiny. And so I think I'm landing on too much work overcommitted because I can say no to things and push back on that. So that's sort of, you think about locus of control, and That's sort of where I'm landing on this. I'm sure there are other depends,
Yeah.
but in terms of the options, that's sort of where I'm landing with a late vote with the benefit of all this conversation.
Well, that's what this conversation is for. Richard, how about you? Had you voted, or have you made a conclusion like DJ did?
I voted. For me, it was the shifting priorities,
Okay.
right? Because I can always talk about the lost opportunity cost to my leaders when they're asking for new things.
Yep.
And making sure they understand that before, they really bulldoze people to say, this is what it is.
Yeah. Awesome. I now want to give Faith and Steve a chance to sort of, DJ started making a case and did an amazing job making a case for the too much work over committed. We need John Harmer and his no button here. Faith or Steve, any thoughts on the too much work over committed?
That's the one that I voted for the same reasons that DJ just gave, that's something in terms of being addressable. That's something that I can do something about. I can choose to do the work or not. I can choose how I communicate about it. I can choose whether to stay in that situation. I can choose to just let things fall off the bottom of my to-do list. And, other people might not like that, but if I've already told them that that's going to happen, then, their reaction to that is on them. Organizations kind of create product management shaped holes, or a hole that they call product management. If you're working inside that hole, you can only influence what's going on inside there. If you are working outside that hole and you can affect the way the organization has shaped that hole that they call product management, then different things might be in your control, your ability to influence. But if you have put yourself or allowed yourself to be inside the hole that the organization has said is the product management hole, then I think locus of control is a great thing. Like, you have to find, what are the things that I can actually do something about, and kind of know that difference between things that are out there that I can't control and things that are in here that I can.
Yeah, and I think I didn't put a lens on this question in, right? I think there's May asked a really good question about, can you address too much work with better role clarity? I think you can, but it's also who the lens is. The people defending too much work are like, that's what I, as an individual contributor, have control over. I can say no to stuff, and that type. Where as a product leader, head of product, a VP of product, perhaps you can have a bigger impact on your whole organization, your whole team, with the role clarity. I think that's sort of where my head was, and I answered it from that lens versus otherwise. Cory, you've got your hand up.
I did not vote.
I didn't think about
because I think the conversation, and to piggyback on what DJ and Faith were just saying, the most addressable cause of stress and burnout is you. You change your mindset, you fix your outlook,
I'm the most
fix your
addressable.
company, because the other people, as much as I want to, I can't change other people. Even everybody on this call, right? I cannot change your opinion. I cannot change your mind. I can give you information and you can change your mind, or you can change your opinion if you want to, if you're open to that. If you're not, you're going to go on your way, and our bosses are going to go the way. They continue to do the same stupid stuff they've always done. That's their problem, right? I can choose whether to participate in that or not, and that's up to me. So that's the most addressable thing that I can do, or that any of us can do, is change what we're doing and how we're doing it.
So I'm doing the math in my head, and I think that too much work over committed with Cory and DJ has taken the lead, because we only added May to the lack of role clarity. But it seems like each of these, there was no clear runaway winner. Steve, your thoughts before I move on, or?
Sure. It's I chose overcommitted, and I've been talking to a lot of product marketing managers as well as product managers, and both sides seem to be saying the same thing. If only I were smarter, I would know I'd be able to prioritize my way or roadmap my way through this never-ending list of requests from other people.
Yeah.
And the reality is there's always going to be more work than can be done. There are always more things that we want to buy. There's more things we want to add. There's always more. So you can't, it's a never ending hole, and you can't win. right?
Yeah.
So you have to just get really good at prioritizing that.
No.
Not everything is going to happen. So, and we encountered this in a company of less than 10, and we encounter this in companies of greater than 10,000, right?
Yeah.
I mean, no matter your company size, there's always more desires than we have resources.
No, completely and totally. Gosh, we're part of the size of the panel. We've been talking a lot. Amazing conversation. I'm making a editorial decision. I'm going to take the first Friday question and make it a thunder round. Hopefully we can get everybody's opinion in on that. Thunder round is a little longer than a lightning round, right? It rolls a little, so you don't have to do a Joy McCaffrey one-word phrase answer. You can, give me a short paragraph or something like that. And, this is thinking to the product leader lens, right? If product leaders, if 70% of people are burnt out, I guarantee you there are product leaders who are not aware that their teams or people are burnt out, or 70% of their people are burnt out. What are the signs product leaders can look for to see if their product management team may be burning or burnt out? What are the early warning signs that come from this? And I'm going to start with Cory.
Random uncontrolled sobbing and throwing chairs. Both of those.
He said early signs, Cory.
I didn't say early or late. It just said signs.
Signs. What are the signs? That is true. So uncontrollable sobbing and throwing chairs.
Yeah, usually at random events too.
Random events. There we go. Richard, you're on mute.
Starting to just say no to everything.
Saying no to everything. Don't have the time, don't have the bandwidth. No. Okay. I like that. DJ.
2 words: thrash and despair.
Thrash in despair. Okay.
And despair. Yeah. So thrash is basically you'll see a lack of focus. I've felt this personally, where you're trying to fight fires on all fronts, and despair usually is teased out through conversations. You can just get a general sense of demeanor, how that person is feeling, lack of motivation. Yeah. Thrash and despair.
Thrash and despair. Faith.
Did you say Faith?
I said Faith.
So I guess I would say if people, the opposite of saying no to everything would be saying yes to everything. So if nobody's engaging, nobody's asking questions, nobody's challenging anything you're saying, and they're just
taking
what you said and just walking away, and they're obviously not, they've obviously stopped bringing their talents or experience to the table, and they're just trying to go back to their desk and put their head down and put their helmet on and just try to grind it out. So lack of engagement.
Yeah.
The unquestioning yes. Sure, boss.
I've been there. I've done that. Calvin.
You say, I thought, behavioral changes, which is, I guess, probably a sanitized way of saying thrash and despair.
I love it. I love it. Joy.
Faith kind of stole my answer. I was going to say lack of participation. Not so much just saying yes to everything, but kind of not pushing back anymore, not giving your opinions, not adding anything. But I guess to Faith's point is just like, yes, boss, whatever. I think you're insane, but sure.
You don't, that the other part was said quiet out, not said out loud, right? I think you're insane. You keep that in your quiet voice, in your inside voice, the head.
That's a Joy can be angry Obama to my,
Yes. Jason Weber.
There's been a lot of good answers, so I'm going to give you a paragraph. Sorry. As a manager, and I've done this for a while, I meet with my people every other week for an hour. That is not, and I tell them this is not a status update. This is talk about whatever you want to. And I have found that connection and interaction really gives me a good sense of where they are. And as a manager and as somebody who has some emotional intelligence, whoever you are, you should be able to sense a change. I mean, Calvin said, I forget, behavioral changes or whatever. You'll feel it. That if you actually take the time with your people and connect with them and understand them as people, you'll feel the change when it happens, and you should be in tune with that. It's an incredibly important part of the job as a people manager. So
that was a
there's my paragraph.
Nice rolling thunder one. Tracy Hollister, do you have a take?
Yes, and this actually happened to me one time. When you start Googling burnout or am I burnt out, that's a great sign. Burnt out.
So if the browser history shows them searching, am I burnt out? Okay, I like that. Jason Vinceletter.
I found that some of the early signs for my team members have been their tone. They can be very short with answers, and you just got to listen to the tone. It goes back to what everybody else is saying about, stopping communication. If they are overly communicators, if they tend to be jovial and they start to be very short with their answers. So those little things, and then talking more about what Jason Weber was saying was, and then getting into those as indicators during into those one-on-ones as well. But yeah, when I've experienced that and try to address it is when I see tones changing and with my staff, or with 360s for people that they're working with, and they actually come to me and tell me that there might be some issues.
Yeah, I love that. Eva.
So I have a prop because I won this on an online auction. So if I become like this, look at that, it's not the best. So if I become like the Rocky IV robot, then I'm burnout.
If you become a robot, I mean, knowing you from these calls, Eva, I have to think that if you stop showing emotion, if you stop showing passion,
exactly, that
would be for you.
Yes,
because that's like, and it's hard to imagine you without passion and emotion. May.
I think that we assume when we talk about this, it's about product managers who are very passionate about their work and who care about the role and care about the purpose of product management. So when your people burn out, it's when they stop complaining, because there's always going to be systemic issues within an organization, and it's always going to get in our way, and that's fine. But when they stop complaining, it means they've accepted it or they've tuned out. So like early signs is when you stop hearing people talk about the problems.
That's a great one. I love that. Steve.
Well, I'm reminded of something May Wong said about 6 months ago, and the number one product metric to care about is team morale.
Actually, that was Joy that said that.
So I applaud May for quoting Joy in the discussion we had 6 months ago. Yeah, I mean, silence is not golden. If people are just putting their head down, then they're quietly quitting.
I completely agree. And it's interesting that this is the first time the quiet quitting concept came up. It's been a hot topic recently. I'm actually going to go with my answer back to something Eva was talking about in her answer on Monday. When people stop engaging with each other outside of just the work stuff, right? If people just all of a sudden they're keeping their heads down, they're doing their job, they're not talking to each other, not engaging with each other. And sometimes it's tough. And this is one of the problems with this sort of remote world and this Zoom-led world is that you have less chances to have those casual interactions, those water cooler conversations. But the more people keep to themselves, the more people their heads down, they're not engaging with others. I think that's a sign of it as well, because they're like, I'm fed up with it. I just want to focus on my job. And this is a major issue, and not just in product management, but definitely in product management. And May, I want to heed your call. I want this to be a place where we can get people to start talking about it, and get product leaders starting to think about what can they do, not just product leaders, organization leaders, to start thinking about how do we address this. I think that there's a systemic issue in organizations, as you said, May, that if we don't address this, I mean, it could be catastrophic for industry, right? If people aren't doing what they do, and maybe some of the stuff with more flexible work arrangements and with 4-day weeks and with stuff like that, maybe there's some ways you can do it with that way, but it really comes down to people feeling needed and wanted and valued. And I think there's a big problem with that there. Gosh, what an amazing conversation. I didn't mention it earlier. I think this is the closest we had to 100% ratio of number of people on the call and number of people who answered the poll. And what a great engagement this week. This is still a topic that I'm still thinking a lot about. I'm ruminating on. I appreciate everybody. Joy, Jason Weber, Jason Vinceletter, DJ, Calvin, Tracy, Richard, Faith, May, Eva, my partner, Steve. Thank you guys so much for having these vital conversations every week. They're incredibly valuable for me, but I also think incredibly valuable for their participants and hopefully the people who watch or listen to them, because, these conversations help us think through things and help us change our minds and go new places. We do this every week. On Monday, I put a question in and Eva Beasley knows what to answer and think about for, oh wait, no, that was Jason that used to know what to think about for the week. Wednesdays, we do our polls, and on Fridays, we have these amazing conversations. Everybody, thank you so much for being open, being candid, sharing. This was a topic where I think we had to open up, and thank you so much. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll see you next week in the community. Take care, everybody.